morning. Welcome to our AutismBC Facebook Live session on the topic of IEP throughout the years. My name is Della Hui, Information Officer with AutismBC, and I'm also the parent facilitator of our AutismBC Burnaby Community Support Group. Today we have Bohdanna Popowycz as our speaker. Bohdanna is a board-certified behavior consultant, and she has been doing great work in the autism field for more than 25 years. She has been working with people from toddlers to adults. One of her passions is to work with the family and school to develop solid IEP. So hi, Bo.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so we are having this 2-hour Facebook Live session with our Burnaby Community Support Group with a full house in this room, and it's all because of you. And a hot topic, IEP at this time of the year. For Facebook people, please type your questions on the Facebook comment section, and we'll try to answer them as much as we can. So without further ado, IEP throughout the years presented by Bohdanna Popowycz.
Thanks. I'm so glad everybody's here. Oh, we got that. I'm going to try really hard to stay right here. I'm from Chicago, so I'm a big mover, so I will try to, wave my hands around, but try to stay right here. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. I know this is a really, really hot topic, and I know that it's can also be a really scary topic. So I'm just going to take you on a 2-hour tour, on a 2-hour journey. But one of the things I was saying to the group that's here, to the Facebook Live people, is that I really encourage questions, because this needs to be interactive. I may not be able to answer your child's specific questions, but I will hopefully broadly respond to the questions that may be helpful to you, and some of the parents we said will talk later, or I can answer some questions later as well. Like Stella was sharing, I've been doing this for a long time, and I think that some of the things that I think's benefited me a little bit in the scary topic of IEP is because when we hear that word, does everybody know what IEP stands for? Does anybody not know? Okay, great. So an individualized education program means just that. We need to embrace those words by understanding that when you go in to have this, what I want to help you with is understanding that you want to go in with some power, with some knowledge. I think a lot of times when we have IEPs, people feel rushed. We're trying to look up goals that are going to match the school rather than kind of matching your child. A lot of it needs to be very, like it says, individualized to your child. So I really want to focus on the fact is that the control needs to be coming a lot from yourselves, so you feel comfortable that when you're in a school, that you're in a school setting, that you're actually meeting those really, really important goals that you feel are best going to benefit your kiddo, because you know your child best, right? Just like I know my child best, you know your child best. One of the things I do is I have a PowerPoint, and I'm going to be really honest, I am not reading it word for word, right? That's just not who I am. You have the PowerPoint, you can take it home. I really want to kind of go through some thoughts and processes to kind of help you to understand, but I might skip around a little bit, so don't think I'm going to flip through the PowerPoint exactly. So to me, this is my definition of an IEP. An IEP is not just built for your child. I like this definition, that the team should explore the need for strategies and support systems to address any behavior that may impede the learning of a child with a disability or the learning of him or his peers. So I'm not just adding that it's for your child. Your child is in school. They are now a part of a whole. So when we're thinking about the IEP, we're not writing an IEP as if your child's living and doing an ABA program in your home in your basement, right? They're going to be around other kids. So a lot of the IEP really should be reflective of how do we make your child a social member of that community, right? And from the beginning, I was talking to this lovely lady here, I start thinking of, and I'm going to talk a lot about this because when I start talking about the IEP here, even when I talk about goals for preschool kids, it's not that it's just goals for preschool kids. These goals can be changed and modified as your child grows. So at the end of the day is, I know this might sound strange, but when I start thinking about doing an IEP for a child in preschool, I'm already closing my eyes, and this is a little scary, you ready? And envisioning them when they're 10, 12, and 14. It doesn't mean that I have the knowledge or a crystal ball, but I think the mistakes that I've made in the past is kind of globalizing the IEP and kind of forgetting that it's a living document, right? Because we have to remember that the IEP in Canada can be changed and morphed, right? I also work in the States where it's a little bit different because the IEP is law there. So, which means that if an IEP is written, parents, they write the IEP, they work with the school, and we can revisit the IEP there because I work in the States every single day. Here in Canada, it's a little bit different because we have to have coverage for teachers, and it's worked a little bit differently. So you get to kind of see your IEP on average once or twice a year. So that kind of raises panic in us because we feel that the document can be being kind of static then, right? It can kind of get cobwebs. So just as we're talking about this, think about the pattern of the fact is when we write goals, we want to make sure that we write goals that we are going to see reflective, that we can see change. One of the things that kind of I find difficult is that when you have a goal written in September, and then maybe you have a review date maybe in March or June, one of the things that I think that I find stressful, and please let me know if you do as well, is when you get to June and you're reviewing it and you're going, this IEP goal was met, but this one was not. What does that mean? That may mean that the goals were too broad, too big, and that we were not actually talking and reviewing them and taking the data information to make sure that these goals were being met. Does that make sense? Because I think that sometimes the document, I'm going to be honest, because as a parent who's on both sides, as a professional and as a parent who has an IEP for their child, I kind of like, when my kids were little, not knowing, I would take that document home and put it somewhere and then have to search for it, right? It needs to be a document that I'm reviewing and using. It should be kind of like your to-do list. I should be getting data, or you should be getting information, so you look at your IEP and you start celebrating in short term that your child's meeting these goals. It shouldn't be a document, I'm hoping for you, that you review in June, hoping that you met some of those goals, right? So I also like the fact that it's also incorporating that your child is a social member of that school. I don't know all of your kids, and I don't know all of their strengths and weaknesses, but really, once your kid's in school, and I'm not gonna use words like inclusion, because I think that that's really a broad word, because I don't think that everybody really defines the word the same way. I think that sometimes inclusion to some schools, and I'm saying this with all due respect, may mean that they feel that the child's included because they're breathing the same air and they're in the hallway. Some people think of inclusion as having a child in the classroom all the time, and they want the child in the classroom all the time. But what we want and what's correct for the kid doesn't always mesh unless we have really good data and really a good understanding of what the child needs. So that's why I'm saying inclusion can mean a lot of different things for different children, but our kid from the beginning is going to help us understand what that's going to mean for that child. So sometimes it's hard as a parent to know what we want rather than what's kind of happening and realistic and doable. Does that make sense? So kind of going on to the next one. I know I say preschool here is a realistic goals, but is there anybody here with really young kids or preschool kids? Preschool? Anybody else with two preschool? Kindergarten? Grade 1? I'm going to kind of go through this briefly, but it kind of does affect more younger kids, but you can start thinking about how it can affect your older child. So, I already got Chris in this morning, because can you believe it? At 7:30 I had an IEP. And I was a little bit panicked, even though I have been doing IEPs for 25 years. You still get a little bit panicked because people wanted to get the IEP done. And here's a disclaimer, just so you know. I'm going to talk about the IEP, how I know, and how it's been done. Supposedly right now there is rumor that there might be some BCTF, Teacher Federation changes in how the IEPs are going to be written. Right now the IEP needs to be a measurable documentation. I need to know how much something is happening and not happening so you can move the goals forward, right? So for example, if a child is, for today's example was if a child is engaging in, does everybody know what self-stimulatory behavior is? Self-stimulation, stimming. I want to know, for example, how long they're doing a duration. So if we're gonna say, I always use this analogy. Anybody out here smokers? Good for you. Is that if you, I use analogies a lot. If you smoke 20 cigarettes a day on the IEP, I can't write down that a child will smoke 5 cigarettes tomorrow. Why? Too fast, too soon, right? So when you're writing an IEP, what do you think is a great place to start with? What do you think you need? A baseline. Does everybody know what a baseline is? you need somewhere to start. We have to start at ground zero. Because I find a lot of times with IEPs, we do a lot of guessing. The child will write his name by the end of the year, but we didn't really kind of look at where he's at right now. If the child's picking up his pencil and just learning to pick it up, it's really difficult to say that our goal can be that the child's gonna be writing his name at the end of the year, because what should a goal be? Holding a pencil, right? Exactly. So one of the things I do is I really felt that today's IEP was difficult for me to attend because I haven't been to the school yet. So what haven't I had a chance to do? Observe, right? So you're kind of feeling it coming from a really cold place. So if your child's younger, and even if your child's older, talking to the preschool parents, one of the things I like to do with parents is it's really important to make sure that we are observing the environment to find out what our goals need to be. So with a preschool, I like to go check out the entire environment to see what the teacher's singing, to see what the kids are doing, to see what toys are there, to see what we could be pre-teaching at home. Because one of the things I always, at least in my practice, is I like to make sure that, is everybody here in an ABA program? Are you raising your hands on Facebook land? Is that if you're in an ABA program, in my practice, I like to think about this switch to school, is that we're building those tools in your ABA program for your child to be a social member within the school. So if the teacher is singing, hello everybody, pick up your toys, but I'm singing the Barney song at home, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna switch the song because what do I need to do for that child? I need to make sure that I'm giving him the tools of what's happening at school and not what we're doing at home anymore, right? So doing that observation for yourself, your consultant, or whoever you do it is extremely important, because if you don't know what's happening at school, it's really difficult to write an IEP goal, right? So that's when we talk about the baseline. It's super important when you think about your IEP and when you're going to your meetings with your consultant and talking to the IEP team, which I want to be very respectful of. The fact is, many times people running the IEP, with all due respect in the schools, perhaps are not extremely well versed in IEPs. So you might have a brand new IST teacher. We have a very low shortage of teachers, as we know right now, right? And so part of the, is anybody here a teacher? Anybody, you're a teacher? So we know, like right now, with teachers, like right now, there's a lot of filling in of teachers that have never heard of what IEPs are. I got a lovely email the other day looking for me to come to the IPA. For me, that's a really delicious beer. So a lot of it is the team might not know. So that's why I'm encouraging you as parents to really know what you want for your child and to feel that you have some control. The worst thing ever is walking in, and I know this as a parent, feeling that you've left the meeting not having your needs met, right? And so, and not especially because that's a domino effect of not having your kids' needs met, right? And so that's why I think that that's super important to have that baseline, to have that understanding of where your child's at, because what's super important is that the goals have to be realistic and doable, right? So if it's not realistic and doable, then you're never gonna meet those goals. And then when you don't meet those goals, the thing is you continue carrying those goals over to the next year and to the next year, and you don't feel like you have that sense of achievement, right? I think another really important thing is in your IEP is to really think about when you're talking about your child. When you're talking about your child, there's a section that's going to have strengths and weaknesses, and I think it's really important to really define your child and to make sure that you have a clear definition to the school that they understand who they are. A lot of times they're like, you know, funny, good sense of humor, and I mean, I think that those are lovely things, but I think to really be very, very specific rather than vague is super helpful. I think it's great when a kid has a great sense of humor. I love people with a great sense of humor. I like to laugh. But I think to really make sure that you're outlining in the strengths and weaknesses, if they're very strong in reading, put that. If they have a phobia of the hand dryer in the bathroom, put that. If people don't know, they're going to put your child into a precarious situation by accident, right? So being as specific as possible is important. And one of the things is especially for kiddos, I struggle with kiddos. I think sometimes we talk about which child, and I'd like to be really honest. I'm struggling a little bit because I'm not used to being on TV. But is the fact is that children especially who are more verbal, I struggle a little bit with kids like that because the expectation sometimes in school is a little bit higher because the teacher is like, well, he talks, so he must understand. And I think it's really important for us to be really clear that there's a very clear definition between communicating and talking, speaking, right? Because sometimes I have kids who are amazing, I don't know if any of you guys do, that are really good at the social fake. So a lot of kids who are big pleasers. So I'm working with a young man right now and I'm giving him directions and he's going, got it, yes, teacher Bo, I got it, And then I walk away, he's like, I have no idea what she's talking about, right? But a lot of times, and that's a disagreement where we struggle at school, and it's so important for you parents that do have kids that are speakers to make sure that you clearly let the IEP know that my kid can speak, but when he's getting information, he might not be getting all of it. At my IEP this morning, the teacher was like, he talks great, so they removed his EA support. Because he's talking, he doesn't need that support, right? He told me what he was supposed to do, but at the end of the day, he'd never put pencil to paper, because the boy said, but you never said pencil to paper, right? Because of that misunderstanding. He said, do your work, but he said, you said do your work, but you didn't say blah, 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 right? There's always that kid that, so I think that that's really important, and I think that that's a misnomer, that children with autism are always comprehending exactly what's happening. Remember, when your child's going to kindergarten, when your child's going to a different school, some of you have kids transitioning to middle school, that's a huge venue change, right? Think about all those small things. Like, again, this IEP this morning was like, I was reading his IEP from last year. He needed very little support in the class in socials. So this is grade 7. Anybody got kids transitioning like middle school, high school kiddos? Right? He's in grade 7, but then he was doing great in socials. By the end of grade 7, in the IEP, which we were reading from last year, we were revisiting it, he was getting 80% independence. But this year in grade 8 in socials, he's needing so much more support. Why do you think that is? Pardon?
Because it's a new school, new environment.
Exactly. New school, new environment. He just portaged from one class to another and he forgot his pencil and binder in the other class. What happened in grade 7? Pretty much are static in one classroom. So as we know, a lot of our kids really struggle with what? Executive functioning, organizational skills. So because a child met a goal in one grade, doesn't mean they're going to meet it the next year exactly the same way. So that's why we have to be extremely careful when we build our goals, and then when we keep moving our goals to make sure, is that goal met everywhere? You know what I always say? I always say is, if a child knows their name in one room, but can't be at Safeway or in grandma's or someplace else and know their name, they don't know their name, right? Be really careful about even in your IEP. I live in White Rock, and White Rock is mostly, I say this kindly, seniors, probably like myself. And at the end of the day, is I taught a boy, and I said, what's your name? And he said, Billy, right? So I taught him that. We went to White Rock on a visit, and we're in the mall. And a little lady comes up to him and goes, hi, what are you called? What's the problem?
Now what's your name?
Exactly. So those little things are huge because our language doesn't just go one way. We have so much different vernacular in the world. You know, where do you live versus where's your house? You know, so many different ways of asking questions. But that's where it goes back to kiddos that are very verbal. We assume they just know because they're able to tell you things. So I think it's extremely important, going back to your IEP, to remember, never assume. Because number one, people just assume if a kid can talk or if kid's writing his name or can answer questions that they don't need support because they're looking like they're, you know, got it together. But think about all those things in your IEP that you want to encompass, is that a child might be talking really well with a teacher because, as we know, many children with autism do quite well with us because we're forgiving, right? We adapt ourselves to the children. But what happens when other kids are talking to kids? It's the hidden curriculum, right? They don't know what they're talking about. Our kid likes Pokemon, but they're in grade 7, and the kids are outside in grade 7. And what do kids in grade 7 do at recess? They walk around, they talk about girl, boy stuff. It's no more playing soccer, right? It becomes very hidden. So all those things you have to think about. So when I'm still talking about preschool, but I'm also talking about the fact is, make sure that when you're thinking thinking about your goals, you're really embracing who your child is and what your child's, I'm going back to strengths and weaknesses are, their needs and deficits. Because for me, honestly, I really think about the 4 goals that we're working on in the IEP: communication, self-adaptation, behavior, and academic. My biggest thing that I can say is only have 1 to 2 objectives or goals for everything, because if your document is this big, what's gonna happen to it? Nobody's gonna read it. Exactly. And the thing is, you won't meet those goals, because I truly believe that in a document like that, you're trying to actually document a lot of a little versus a little of a lot, right? And so, especially in the beginning, I'm going to go back to the preschool years, when you're doing the preschool data, you're really trying to highlight and to really build on some of those goals that you want the child to have within a school community. So again, going back to baseline, we really have to be humble and think about the fact that is if your child at baseline, I'm gonna keep saying this over and over, is at circle time, and we're not giving any supports, and that child over the course of 3 days, first day sits down for 4 seconds, next day sits down for 8 seconds, Thursday sits down for 6 seconds, what's our baseline? 5 seconds maybe, right? And so a lot of times at the IEP, there's the desire to be able to say, Johnny can sit for 5 minutes, right? I will go back to that all the time, because what do people, especially at schools, what do people want? For the child to sit at circle time, for the teacher. And it's one of the most difficult things as you as a parent and your support system that comes to the IEP is helping the school understand, I know it's hard to understand this, that's what we want, but it's not what we want, it's what's really happening, right? So a lot of times, 5 seconds on your IEP, if that's the real goal, the objective would be for them to sit for 4 seconds and possibly to be removed at 5, because what don't you want the child to do at 6 seconds? No. Elope, right? Because then what happens is the child elopes because we had too big of a goal, and then we're chasing the child around, right? And then bringing them back, and they're unhappy. The baseline, let's look at ourselves as like we're scientists, right? We have to follow a baseline to know what we're teaching our child on, right? We cannot, I love hope, but I also know that that doesn't work. And then what happens if you really have outlandish and too many goals? After 2-3 weeks, the goals are, people are frustrated, your child's failing because our goals are too lofty. And I really feel that at the beginning of the IEP and getting to know the child at school, it's so important. I'm teaching reading strategies right now to a young person at the school where I'm working at. And I'm doing an assessment. And one of the things the teacher is saying to me is this workbook is too easy, right? And so in my heart, when I'm doing an assessment and I go to the next level, I want that child to be able to have 80% success on the reading and only teaching them 20%. Because think of your child, what if I was giving them a book where it was 80% hard and 20% easy, right? If I was challenging your child too much. Your child has, or your children have autism. We have children who struggle with motivation. We have children who struggle with failure. We have children who struggle with reading. All those components, if we push too hard, if I gave this young lady a book and I went from her being successful at this level to jumping over here and she fails, what's going to happen? Behaviors, right? And so when you're thinking about that, like I keep saying, keep thinking about that when you're writing your child's IEP goals. They need to be realistic and doable. The other part about the realistic and doable part is you need to make sure that you have the supports in place that can actually do those goals, right? So it's really important that if they're gonna put a goal, if we're gonna put a goal into the IEP, we need to know who's gonna be implementing it, who's gonna be supporting it, and who's gonna be doing it to make sure that the child's reaching those goals. So if you're gonna be putting a goal that the child's gonna be doing 4 out of 5 math problems, we need to know what's our action plan, right? What are gonna be the strategies? Who's gonna be there helping and supporting and prompting? And how are we going to decrease those prompts? Because as we were talking before, this lovely lady in the front here, is that it's really important to know that we are trying to increase, number 1, your child's independence at school. The last thing you want to do is have a child who's going to be graduating in grade 12 and us in panic, and we still have the child on the highest prompts possible. That's why the IEP has to work to your favor, goals are doable and realistic, so then you can actually see measurability of your child moving forward. Like again, going back to the last thing you want is to revisit that IEP and you have the exact same goals year after year, right? Is everybody good with any questions or comments on that? Thoughts? Good. So one of the things, I'm gonna pass this around. This is just the little helpful hints. And it doesn't matter if your child's in preschool or in high school. One of the things I do is you have to remember that teachers, I'm realistic because I'm also a teacher, teachers in schools are really busy. And in reality, my daughter's a teacher, I'm super proud of her. Well, in 12 weeks she will be, fingers crossed. I mean, I am paying her tuition, I hope she's going. So, but one of the things I know, for example, you have to be very honest about the fact is that more than likely, your child is not the only child in that classroom with an IEP, right? More than likely, there's, because of the new rulings, there is only one child, is it? I could be incorrect, with a G designation per class now, or 2 children. I think it's one, is it 2? 2? 2 kids with a G designation, which makes it really difficult and stressful because, for example, I'll give you an example. I've got 3 kids in high school with a G designation who love drama. Only 2 kids with a G designation could be in the classroom. So where does that 3rd kid go? Do you know what scheduling nightmare that is and what kids are not getting classes that they want? My kid included, she does not have a G diagnosis, but just scheduling for anybody is really, really stressful. Oh, I'm gonna pass this around, I'm sorry, thank you. So, I like to be humble by the fact is I would love if every teacher went home and got a bottle of red wine and popcorn and read your IEP thoroughly. But I cannot promise that because they might have 7 IEPs, they might, and I can't promise that all teachers will want to read the IEP. I am not here to say anything but positive things about teachers, but realistically, that happens. And I'm sure that's happened to you, that the teacher is not maybe aware of your child's IEP, doesn't know your child's strengths and weaknesses. The other thing is, your child is not just a member of that classroom, are they? They're a member of the whole school. And one of the things that could happen by accident is your child was walking through the hallway and another teacher from the other hall is walking down the hallway and sees your child maybe engaging in a behavior or maybe can do something to trigger a behavior by accident. Has anybody ever had that happen or the fear of that happening? They may not even know who your child is. So one of the things I like to do, as this is being passed around, is I like to make a very simplistic, I'm just gonna hold it up again, do you mind? Oh, sorry, hi. Is a very simplistic profile with that child's picture per the parents, okay, of the child's, almost like in me statements. Like, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is kind of what bugs me. Because this is a lot easier and doable and realistic for teachers and people to read than an IEP. Sometimes I think teachers are scared to read IEPs because sometimes they are thick documents, right? But this at least, I'm using this with a lot of kiddos, even in high school, because one of the things I find is by the time you're in week 3 of something and you don't have this out to the whole school, you've got 20 or 30 teachers that don't know your kid in that school saying hi to him in the hallway, not knowing that's the worst trigger to put him into a horrible tantrum. It's not their fault. They don't get the IEP because they don't see that kid. In grades 1 to 8, they don't, maybe when your kid's in grade 1 or 2, they may have never seen your child in the hallway. So they might be just doing something inadvertently, not knowing your child. I think this is huge. Another reason I think this is huge is this brings kind of life to your child. Does that make sense? The IEP is nice, but it's a document. There's a picture of your kid here. There's his likes and dislikes. And then you're kind of putting in, please don't say hi to me in the hallway when I'm crying. Or please don't tell me to stop crying when I'm crying, right? But this is so much easier to read for people. Like I said, another thing is, I do this a lot for high school kids. How many people have middle school, high school kids again? I give it a lot to high school kids is because honestly, I don't know how high school teachers do it sometimes. They have a bunch of kids, and even though there's supposed to be like a universal design of teaching, does everybody know what that is? No. So the UDL approach, again, I'm a teacher in the States and we should be doing it. Every teacher should be having a curriculum for the high learner, the medium learner, and the struggling learner, right? So that means the adaptation should always be there, right? But that doesn't always happen, right? And so what happens is your kiddo, and maybe this has happened to some of you, gets adaptations on the fly. So that means, so let's take you for example. So your child is getting a socials worksheet and your EA doesn't know your child, so she's taking a black marker and crossing out numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9, right? Because that's an adaptation. Does everybody know what an adaptation is? That means altering or changing the work to make sure that the child is supported. But what if that child hates having things crossed out on their paper? And the teacher didn't know that, right? What if that's their biggest trigger? I have so many young people that I work with that one of their first IEP goals for themselves in high school is, I want my work to look like everybody else's, right? Isn't there something so humbling in that? And if we don't know that, and we give them a worksheet that looks like a baby worksheet, we've made that child feel so horrible because we didn't hear how that child learns best. So one of the things is inadvertently, if I don't tell the teacher, and this happened to me again this morning, we're into week 3, and this young person has paper to pencil fine motor issues, and she's never met him, but the EA came in and she goes, no, that's okay, he can write it. But she doesn't know, because she hasn't read this yet, that he can't put paper to pencil, so he's fallen so far behind, he's feeling bad about himself, and he's having an anxiety behavior. So then she's thinking, oh, this is a difficult kid, but not going that preventative strategies could have been put into place. So this profile, I make sure that I email it, give it to every single teacher before they walk in day 1. Prevention is so much better than fixing, isn't it? It really is so much better if it's doable and preventable from the beginning. And I say especially with kids, if you're giving the child or the youth especially a worksheet and they don't want to look different than other kids, if you know in advance, which could be part of your IEP goal, that worksheet needs to look similar but maybe a little bit different, and you're putting it down and he looks at his worksheet and he shouldn't be looking at his neighbor's, but he looks at his neighbor's worksheet and it looks the same versus black lines. What does that mean to that kid when his lines are black like that and everybody else has the same worksheet? I'm different, right? So again, I'm generalizing, but I'm trying to generalize to kind of give a global understanding of, we have to be humble to understand that every child is unique. And if you're not prepared for that child, and if we're not prepared for writing that into the IEP and knowing how the child's adaptations and strategies are best used, we can be fixing. And we know from data, if something goes on for 3 months, it takes 3 times as long to fix, right? So we want to make sure that we are extremely preventative and on top of things from the beginning, without feeling that we're overwhelming the teacher. So the teacher, a lot of cheat sheets and cheat notes. You know, me personally, I don't walk in day 1 with going, see this data sheet that's 14 pages long? I want that filled out every day, right? You're going to scare the person. You know, we need to go in there firstly and foremostly that we are prepared to be a team. Number 1, you are going to be your child's parent for the rest of their life. Your goals and your child's goals are really important, but now we're a village. And if that village doesn't understand your child, they're gonna make mistakes. And then what happens when that happens, miscommunications start happening. And we as parents, myself included, we get our back up, right? But that child and that teacher are going to be together every single day for 6 hours a day. And the more information they know with the way that they want to get it, the better. Questions or comments? Good. So, I sent that away. So, like I said, a lot of the things we want to focus on is, again, what we were talking about. I focus heavily a lot on the social emotional part, because I really feel that for a child to learn, they have to learn how to learn. Does that make sense? So, at the end of the day is, even though I want a child to perhaps, like maybe we have an academic goal that the child's going to learn to spell, we need to make sure that the child has all those strategies and all the understandings on what skills that they have now and what do you want to get to learn to spell. So for example, learning to spell is a very broad goal, isn't it? So we have to really understand when we write our goals, the strategies that we're always thinking in our heads, and you as parents with children, oh, I thought you were raising your hand. You as parents with kids with ASD, the biggest goal is, as right now, I should have mentioned this before, The new position I have right now working at a school is I am the transitional and the social skills development coach for kids going out to the work placement. And one of the things I say a lot of times, and I say this to Stella, if I have helped your child be a neurospace engineer, but a neurospace engineer who can't go have a beer with a friend after work, I've helped your child be a very lonely neurospace engineer, right? So the part of it is the academics is really important. I'm not saying it's important, but I know kids who are right now getting their dogwood, but have no idea how to walk across the street. So you can have a beautiful dogwood in your house in your basement. A dogwood is the graduation diploma.
Oh.
That's okay, no, that's great, thank you for asking. The question was what a dogwood was. There's different, there's a leaving certificate called the evergreen, which means that you finish high school, but you haven't done all the classes to graduate with a graduation certificate. You actually did you are leaving high school, you've graduated that one. So I'm working with youth right now that have the evergreen, but like at the end of the day is, to me it doesn't, I guess this is just a personal disclaimer, it doesn't matter to me if you have a dogwood or an evergreen if you can't leave your home. I'm gonna be honest with you, 11% of youth with autism are employable, 11%. That's a very low number. That is what research is telling us right now. Only 11%, I'm talking about employable of leaving the house and having a job independently or going to school after they graduate, with or without a dogwood. So when we start thinking about that in our heads, what are we thinking about when we're writing an IEP from the beginning? All the goals that we're working on, we have to start thinking about making our child a social member of the community they live in. Me personally, I'm kind of a hippie, and I don't like rules, right? But I do follow the social rules of life because I have to. When I get to a stop sign, I do stop. But when I go to an amber light, I kind of decide sometimes to push the pedal and go through it, right? But why can I do that? Because I have thought, I have critical thinking, and I know what I should be doing in that instance. Nobody sat down with me and said, I'd like to teach you a lesson and going through an amber light, right? But we know with our population of our kids, yes. Oh, with louder? Okay. With our population, with our kids, that we know that we have to discreetly teach things because our children don't always navigate their social world, right? And so there's a lot of hidden curriculum. There's a young boy to me transitioned to a new school the other day, to high school. And he's coming to high school, and he said to me, I said, how's outside time? How's recess? You know, they don't have recess, but you know, lunchtime. He goes, all the guys went outside, but they didn't ask me. So I had to teach him to say, maybe in high school they don't ask you, you just kind of go, right? Because you kind of, it's different. So those are the kind of things you and I know, but why do we know that? Because we navigate. Let me give you another example. I have a young boy who's in the work, some of you are high school transitioning to work, thinking about work for your child, right? By grade 10, in your IEPs, even earlier, by grade 8, I have kids working. Because executive functioning and organizational skills for our kids take 4 times longer. And I know that in many IEPs, they don't have something till grade 10 planning. But before that, it doesn't mean that your child, like most of my kids have paper routes and are doing things at grade 8 or 9, because if I miss that boat, it's a lot harder for me to teach you to have a job in executive functioning, because by 10, 11, and 12, I have 3 years. That's it. And so 3 years means that I'm still going to high school classes. I might have you going out maybe 1 time a week for 1 hour to a job. We know that's not enough. Don't tell my daughter I'm going to talk about her, but I am. My daughter is 16, she's shy. She's working at Choices, and one of the most difficult things for her, she wanted to work there. She's shy. So she took the job as a cashier. What is one of the skills you have to have as a cashier? You gotta look at people and talk to them, right? She's like, paper, plastic, right? And she came home and she said, I want to do this, I want to defeat my shyness. What are some of the goals? So we worked out some goals. Now she's in heaven, she loves this job. The next goal that came, which, you know, she thought about, and just think about this. Think about your child going, I want to be a cashier. Think of all the social skills you want to do that. We have to listen to what your child wants to be. We are no more in this world of taking a child to Panago to wash a table. Not that Panago's bad, if anybody works at Panago, But in the olden days, we used to take kids to work experience because that's the only place they could get work, wiping tables. You get to go to work and decide where you want to go. So do I. Our kids should have the right to have real work for real pay. And we have to think about what their strengths are, what their passions are, what their preferences are, because our world, sometimes realistically for children with special needs, is not as big as your world, right? We have to customize their employment sometimes because we're working on their skills. So even when they're in grade 2, we start developing their personalities, thinking, what could they do with this amazing personality? Who can they be? I don't know who I want to be when I grow up yet, and I'm not asking you to see what your child wants to be when they grow up, but we have to start thinking about that because it takes our kids longer, right? So by the time this young man was in grade 10, we went to get a job. He knew where he wanted to work. He was so excited. So I got a job coach. This is one of the things I do. And the job coach that I got, he said to me, I don't want anybody following me around. Right? Same thing, like I don't want anybody crossing out my things on the worksheet. So I have to think about this young man still needing those prompts. He can't go into this place, he's gonna fail. So I sent in another young person around his age. He didn't know that he was going in to be that they were job coaches. I paid this boy a couple of years older, so he was cool, right? He went into this job, he was pretending he was learning to bus, just like this boy was learning to bus. But his job was to be that person. So my boy could take the prompts because this guy was cool. What if Teacher Bo went in there? Like get away from me, right? But one of the things is, do I know every single step that's gonna be teaching to be? I could teach him, you're gonna wash a table. We can teach all those skills beforehand, right? So I have the skills. He knows how to wash a table. He knows how to carry the dishes. He knows where to put stuff. That sounds like I've got a pretty good plan, right? We were teaching that was all on his IEP. But what can't you teach sometimes?
When there's things that come up unexpectedly.
Exactly.
Because my little guy get upset when something doesn't go the way he thinks it is, even though it's so common.
Yeah.
For instance, if you sit on, like he spilled the water and he's like, why? And you're
Right.
like, it's okay. So it's for us, we learn that it's okay to have things that goes wrong.
Right.
But to them, sometimes they develop a little too sensitive to things
Perfect.
that are wrong, and you can't really plan every
And you
accident,
can't.
right?
No, and you can't plan for everything. But one of the things, that's a great point. We were talking about how you can't plan for everything and things are unexpected, which might make some students feel uncomfortable and get scared. And I think that part of that is also, you and I know stuff because we know stuff. Not everybody told you how to navigate the world. You learned to walk into a party and go, hey, those people are doing that over there, I'm gonna do it. Or we have to sometimes teach our kids everything so structurally, every single thing. So if you're washing a table like this, really slowly at the restaurant, and the waitress is standing behind you going, why do you think she's doing that?
She needs the table.
Because she needs a table, because what does she want? Money. But my guy's like, and then I say to him, you need to wash the table faster. He's like, why? I like to wash the table this way. But that's not gonna work in the real world, because what you like and what's a rule don't match. Because in our world, just because you have autism does not mean you won't get fired, right? And then where are you when you don't have the skills? You are back home. And we know with our kids, when they fail, what happens? It's really hard.
Yes.
And so I had to go back with my rule book of rule number 7,468 of the social rules of life to say, the lady behind you, because you don't know her, you need to get to know her. I know her. She's a single mom. She has 3 kids. And the faster you wash the tables, the faster she's going to get to a table, the faster she'll get more tips. But wait, and you'll get some too. And he's like, oh, because what do you need at the end? The reinforcer, right? Because our kid's always gonna go, oh, my heart bleeds for her. I'm gonna wash the table faster, right? You have to make sure that the ticket item for this child is not only the empathy for that lady, but knowing that there's still more to come. You'll get more money. And the kid's gonna keep that in their brain. But just think about that, that's grade 10. Think about how you should be teaching those skills in grade 5, right? You start the social skill development, just like with a lot of kids. Why are they reinforced? Why do they do math? because we tell them to. But what's the ticket item for some kids doing math in grade 5? Grades. Some kids like grades, but some kids don't. So you have to make sure that in your IEP, when you're writing the rules, no matter what they are, when you're writing your strategies, that you have to make sure there's always a ticket item. One of the biggest things people like to do is to remove the reinforcer from a child once they're doing well. Why would we think that would not always be a good idea?
It's discouraging.
Yeah,
You're always moving the cheese.
exactly, right? And the thing is, reinforcers can change, but one thing I find in a lot of IEPs, by the time kids get to be older, right now at an IEP I was at recently, was the high school teacher said, well, we're in high school now, so I don't want to give them tokens anymore. But at the end of the day is, I can't take something away that's working to please you, right? I love what I do so passionately, and I hope it shows, but I do need to pay my mortgage. So if you took my money away and I didn't get paid, I would probably still do this job. But it is an incentive, right? So wanting something and removing something, especially in the IEP, we have to be careful. Because I've been at IEPs where parents feel slightly bullied or slightly uncomfortable by maintaining something that is maybe helping their kid, because people feel, again, those assumptions. As you get older, we need to remove the reinforcer. But so then we have to think, in our IEP, when you're in kindergarten, perhaps a reinforcer is a big reinforcer. But as you're going up the years, we can start to change. Keep thinking about what's your kid's ticket item. But it doesn't mean that we can promise you when you get to high school there's no ticket item, right? Especially the hard skills, and the hard skills are the social skills, right? It's really, really difficult to say to somebody, well, why don't you just go sit with Billy at lunch? And where's one of the number one places that support is removed? Recess and lunch. Because we think, well, that's okay because he can stim, it's fine. And I call that social suicide, right? Because the minute you're at lunch and you're sitting by yourself at high school, it is very easy to become habitually sitting. Remember, we're talking about preventative rather than fixing. The minute that your child is sitting by themselves, which everybody's like, well, that's not a big goal because he's got to do trigonometry. To me personally, that's a bigger goal than trigonometry. If you're going to be sitting by yourself, you're going to be a very lonely trigonometry worker. I think I have a question. This is like being on real TV. Is this 2 questions? A nice lady, am I supposed to say their name? Okay. A nice lady from Facebook is asking me, I think it would be good for EAs to also write their version of the profile because they see the preferences more one-to-one. I really appreciate that. So, in saying that, when I meet new parents and when I work with the school, I give the school a preference assessment and I give them a questionnaire of the child. And I give it to the parent and I give it to the EA, and then we match them to see how they match. Because isn't it interesting to see how people see people differently? It's really interesting when I read psychological, thank you by the way, that question's awesome. When I read a lot of psychological evaluations, you know, when you look at your child's testing, I take all of that with a grain of salt because honestly, I'm a really poor tester. So when I look at a test, when you know your kids all get a test and you see what IQ scores they have and what percentile they're in, that's a great baseline, but it's not the be all end all. A lot of times I see the Vineland, does everybody know what that is? The adaptive to know your child's self-adaptive skills, brushing their teeth, getting dressed, taking care of their personal needs. A lot of times parents on the questionnaire will say they can do all that because part of it is we hope they can do all that. And then the EA, when I ask them, how's he changing at gym, right? When you change from your clothes to your gym strip, he can't do it. Because sometimes when you do something at home, it's a little harder at school. Because think about it, you're running, you're getting a locker, you're waiting for the school bell, you're changing in front of a bunch of people you don't know. You know, some people are cool with that, some aren't, right? So it changes. So I think that that's super important. I really appreciate that question. I think it's really important for EAs to be really involved and really knowing and understanding that child because they are going to be with that kid a lot of hours of the day. So it's a great question. Your analogy of washing the table assumes the kids are motivated by things like money. What if they aren't? Well, at the end of the day is that specific child was motivated by money because he wasn't motivated by the empathy of that lady at this point, right? So when I talk about the motivational factor, you need to know what turns that kid on, right? So at the end of the day is, if money wasn't his motivator, I would have not used that analogy with that child. So I think it's really important. So for example, sometimes the motivation, right now at the new school that I'm working at, one of the things we're doing is we're pre-teaching kids to have jobs. We've opened a store. And so in the store, I did a preference assessment for this gentleman for the motivation. And I asked each person, not told them, what part do they want to be in the store? What are you motivated to be a part of? One young man loves money and numbers, so of course he chose to be the banker of the store. One young man loves community outings, so his motivation was he's our supplier. He's gonna supply the store, right? Because what would be so easy for me to do?
Assign job.
Assign it, or
Volunteer?
Or no, it would be easy for me to jump into the car and drive to Walmart and buy everything. I could do it in 4 minutes.
Yes.
But this person, to go, the motivation to go to Walmart, he has to go to the store, and he loves going on outings, but he wants to do what he wants to do. So there's rules, just like there's rules at a job. We're gonna get the gummy bears, but we have to find out from the store manager, so you have to socially communicate. You can't get how many you want, how many orders we had. So we had a social program as part of it, where we actually did an order form, and we went to the whole school and ordered it. So you can't go to the store and get 8,000 gummies because you'd like to eat them yourself. We have to get how much money we have from the banker, we had a talk, to the social person, to the buyer, and he had to buy. Then we have the man who actually goes to the front line. So talking about motivation, you have to think of your child. Are they a frontline person? Are they a medium person? Or are they a backline person? Is your child if you guys have a chance, watch this really awesome video about a coffee shop that is a customized coffee shop for kids with autism. Some people love to be the greeters, I'm gonna get to you in a second. Some people love to be the cashier people, and some people wanna wash the dishes, right? If you wanna wash the dishes, it may not be my job to force you to be a greeter, right? Because I personally would love to be the greeter, but I would hate to wash the dishes. So why do I have to tell that young person you have to be good at everything? Lovely lady, thank you so much.
I guess and I've been thinking a lot about this lately, but it coincides with what you're saying, about some kids aren't motivated by money.
Yes,
But I feel like it's my job as a parent to ensure that they are.
yes,
I feel like the ultimate goal is to not buy anything for my kid on spec just because they want it.
right,
If my kid wants those books or that Lego set
Right.
or whatever, then I have to figure out a way to make them understand that they have to earn it.
right. It didn't just fall from the
Because
sky.
I mean,
Repeat the question.
you know, I don't know people's, whatever your financial circumstances, but if your financial circumstances are such that you can just go out and buy that Lego set,
Right.
and you have always done that, then you're just constantly providing for them.
Right.
They have to be brought to a point so that by the time they're 18, they fully understand that in order to be able to buy the things they want, they need to have money, and that money must be from earning.
Absolutely.
You see, so we have to ensure that they understand that money must become
Right.
the motivator. But we
Right.
have to make money be the motivator.
And I think that if I can, actually this, we were sharing about the fact is how the fact is that money is an extremely important motivator, for the fact is that in reality, you need money to buy things. Things don't just fall off a tree. Your parents don't just give you a gift because you get it. You have to understand that you have to work for it, what that means, and that's a domino effect. How do you get the money? How do you earn the money? How do you save the money? There's so much of that goes into play, and I love that you said that, because that also, going back to just, I wish we had hours upon this, going back to the IEP, it's not that perhaps that's a goal specific for everybody, but you're talking specifically about a goal that you would want for your child, and perhaps that was a goal in the IEP, and do you see how you would have to break that goal down to make it perhaps a 2-year goal to get from here to there? It can't be just like, my child will learn the relevance of money in 3 months, right? It's about the doing, the being, the supporting, the understanding. And if I can take from that, and I appreciate you saying that, and part of the program that I'm doing with the older kids is I'm not placing kids in jobs. I have a whole system of understanding that when you want a job, we go visit many different places. Because I want that child to go in there with a clipboard going, I think, like okay, let's just take Sephora, okay? If I took yours, you have a son or daughter? Daughter. If I took your daughter to Sephora and said, you're gonna work here because I know the Sephora person, what if your daughter hates makeup, right? I want the child, like we were talking before, to become a person of themselves and advocate. I want to go to a lot of different work experiences, and for the child to go, we went to Sephora, Miss Bo, I don't want to work here because you have to start somewhere with understanding that you have to have a job, but really isn't part of your job having some joy. So when you have the job and you're joyful, you'll work there and your productivity will be better. When your productivity is better, what happens? You make money because you want to stay there. But then the next place is I never want children to think, look, I got you a job, I brought you to the restaurant. You need to go through writing a cover letter, understanding, no matter what level you are of autism, you are capable of writing something and doing part of that. Whether it's writing a cover letter, and even children who are functioning at a level who are not writing, if they're gonna have a job, they should have a picture and something they like. They should have always something. It should not just be me carrying this child to the job and plopping them there. So in our program, we have a cover letter, we get references, we have that child understand what a job means. It means you need to show up, because if you don't get paid, right? And I think all of that is so essential, and getting back to your money thing, that money may be the motivator for your child or many kids, but I have to be honest, for some kids, the motivation, I've got a young man, because he's not ready at that place yet to understand what money means. Though he earns it and understands how to do that, he's so motivated by being a social member of that place. So his motivation lies being there, and when he comes in, he knows everybody, he knows how to do the job, he feels successful and wanted. Don't we all deserve that? I have a question. But thank you, I love that. Thank you so much, I appreciate that. Where's my glasses with the tiny writing? In grade 9, what kinds of supports or goals can we demand or actually get? How can learning block be best utilized in subjects that are challenging? Examples of social emotional goals, long-term and short-term. So I'm guessing the question is, you're asking what can you demand or actually get? I think demand is a really interesting word. I think advocate is a good word. I think at the end of the day is, if you're a strong advocate for your child, and I think that that's why you're here today, and I appreciate your time, is that part of it is that's why I'm saying from the beginning, and if you haven't done this, it's never too late, ensure that your document is alive. You have to make sure that your document, that when you're in grade 9, it's not coming from that the document was so vague, and then you want to make it strong. It's going to take some time, I'm not going to lie. And that's why I'm telling parents from the beginning, ensure that your document that you walk in as a parent knowing what you want prior to even setting foot. Make sure that you mock something up, that you have something prepared. The worst thing to do, which parent was asking this question? Thank you. I think the hardest thing is walking in, because I think that I don't care how, I'm a pretty confident person, but I get nervous at IEPs too, especially when somebody's roadblocking you. We can't do that can't happen. I think that what's going to happen in reality is have 4 or 5 things that you really want, but know you might walk away with one, right? And I think the most important thing is, and you're talking if they have an LST block. Does everybody know what that is? No. So an LST block, and correct me if I'm wrong with your own child, is that some kids when they go to high school perhaps don't take a language or don't do like a discovery program. They choose to take a block where they can maybe do their homework and work on different skills. So as you know, you can still get a dogwood without taking French, I believe. Am I incorrect with that? Right. So some kiddos may opt not taking a language, but take an extra block so they can catch up on things. And I think the questions you're asking me is, what part can you design? What could be happening in an LST block? And honestly, I think that it's really important to be able to know what you want as a parent and what your child's lacking, but it's really important to also go back to your data. If you find that your child has struggled in something and your EA or you've taken some data, if your child is if you want it to be a social, I'm wondering if you're asking if it should be a socially based program. If your child's struggling in a socially based program, you might have to translate to your IST why this is important. So you need to know not just I wanna have these social skills, but why, right? So make sure that you come with abundance of tools to know. My child is still struggling in asking questions or relating to his peers, so he's not gonna do well in grade 10 and 11 in classrooms that are group oriented unless he learns these skills. So if you start talking the language, people will understand why. Because if they're thinking you just wanna do social skills, they're gonna go, do you wanna play board games? Right? But what you really wanna do is make sure that your child develops these skills to be able to be higher in the grades of school, to have the skills. One of the hardest things for young people with autism to do in high school is group activities. Because you have to know how to exit and enter into your group. You have to know how to tell your group what you're good at or not good at or what you wanna do. And one of the hardest things is sometimes your group meets after school at somebody's house, right? And if you don't have those social skills to know how to do that, you're gonna have a really hard time being a part of a group. Also too is, I hate to be brutally honest, but it's kind of part of my job. Not all kids are super nice. And if you have been seen as that kid who is not really contributing to a group, the other kids might not pick you, right? Because kids want people in their group that are gonna help them get better grades. So a lot of times, if you don't have some of those social skills, it's really hard to get the academic skills. So I think that if you interpret that and you help the LST person or the integration support person know why you're doing something, rather than it's just I'm gonna use the word demand, I think that the doors will open a little bit more. And then also knowing possibly what curriculum you wanna follow, right? And so sometimes, to be honest, I provide a curriculum because sometimes people struggle in the schools finding the curriculum. Because that's work. And I'm trying to say this kindly, is that sometimes teachers will say, but I don't have time. And I say, oh, but I brought this, is this helpful, right? So you try to kind of dodge those roadblocks by making sure that you perhaps have something so then people don't feel that they are also given more work to do because they're already feeling so overwhelmed, right? So that's kind of helpful sometimes too. And I think it's, is it Sarah Ward's work, the executive functioning book? Great book to do at LST. I'm doing a lot of that.
LSD or T?
It's LST,
Okay.
learning support, what's the T for? It's learning support.
Oh,
LST is a teacher, learning
No,
support
it's
teacher.
we sometimes say SSP also, student support.
Yeah, different places have different rooms for it, but in some schools, it's where, like in my daughter's school, anybody, that classroom is open to anybody and everybody, which I love, because children with unique needs, and I hate this term, but forgive me, neurotypical kids, everybody can come in there. It's like this open classroom where our kids are not ashamed to go to, because it's like, you know, going to that special needs room. Please. I believe it's Sarah Ward, am I correct with that?
Yeah, Sarah Ward, executive functioning.
And actually, I've got a couple of other great executive functioning books that I'm using, so if you want to give me your email, I can send them off to you. But I think that that's the executive functioning, which again, kind of going back to our IEP, oh, sorry. Kind of going back to what we want to hit in our executive functioning, is that that's probably one of the core issues where your child's going to fail, right? Because at the end of the day, going back to your child learning, when I was talking about learning to learn, one of the most important things is, especially when you're starting to be in a little bit upper grades, you need to be responsible for your own materials. I still walk into schools where the teacher says, get your pencil, and the EA is unzipping the pencil bag and handing the pencil to the child. And I try to be polite and saying, oh, that's so kind of you, why are you doing that? And she's like, well, because if I don't do that, he can't keep up with his peers. And what am I thinking in my head? Prompt. I'm thinking it's a prompt, which is great, but I'm also thinking, how do we decrease that? If he can't get out of the pencil box, what should we do instead of giving him the pencil? Or find a different way for him to get his pencil. If he can't open the pencil box, why are we having a pencil box that he can't open, right? And I was just yesterday at the school that I work with, and one of my EAs, one of the gentlemen came up to me and he said, I had no idea until you came how much I was helping him. How much I was actually still leading him by the hand, because what happens sometimes with EAs and the kids they work with.
So my son, I have a very good example. He's in kindergarten last year. when my behavior consultant came to observe him, she found that he wasn't listening to the teacher because he was relying on the EA to tell him what to do. So he completely ignored the teacher when the teacher talked.
I got my person right here.
He just do his thing
Yeah.
until the EA tells him what to do, because he's like, I don't need to know,
Right.
because someone's gonna tell me. So then we're like, oh, no. So we move him to a spot where he can see the teacher when the teacher talks,
Right.
and then take her away. Then he doesn't actually look for her
Right.
to see what the teacher's saying, and he has to like figure out
But
himself.
there has to be strategy. So the question is that the child was relying so hard on the EA that he was actually omitting the teacher
Yes.
as the, I want to use the word boss of the classroom. Now, for me in my IEP, what I would be thinking to myself is I tell parents, when you meet me, that's the first minute to the closest time you're gonna break up with me. Because basically, the EA is there to work themselves out of a job, right?
Yes.
Because when we teach the child to focus on the teacher, even in minimal skills, we're teaching the child that there is a boss of the classroom, because nobody's gonna be Velcro to you for the rest of your life.
Yes.
There's different ways to do it, but to me, that would be a huge IEP goal, because what also happens if the EA and the child get this amazing relationship? What happens to the teacher?
She's not important anymore.
She stops trying,
Yes.
because she goes, you got your person,
Yes.
right? You don't need me. But really what's important is teachers many times, and that's why they're so important in the IEP, they need to be written into the IEP, because ultimately, when the child refers to the teacher, or at least starts to refer to the teacher, and it might be as simple, depending on your child, that the child does the work with the EA, and the first goal just might be that the teacher comes and puts a sticker on his work. Just building a relationship. Because at the end of grade 12, if you don't know that at least the teacher is the boss of the classroom, how do you relate to the boss at your job? Right? How do you know who's telling you, like if the boss tells you to do something, you're looking around going, I've never had somebody talk to me from 10 feet away, right? You know, the other thing is like, I look at it this way too, is like huge skills to learn. It's like referencing skills. So many kids are very good at writing, but they're not good at taking information off a board and writing. Like, those skills are super important. Multitasking, learning to refer. People go, like, my most hated goal, I apologize if anybody likes this goal, is the social goal is Johnny will say hi to his teacher. I hate that goal so much. Sorry.
So basic.
But not only why do I hate that goal? What happens to that kid? Hi, Miss Smith. Hi, Miss Smith. Good morning, Miss Smith. Like that, and then all they're doing is saying hi. That goal can be met in one day. And then what happens if you don't revisit your IEP for 6 weeks, right? And also too, what if your kid hates saying hi?
Yes, that's my kid.
Right? And what if that's a trigger? But I will tell you, 90% of the IEPs that I review has that goal.
Yes.
Johnny will say hi to all his adults as they pass by
With
the hallway.
eye contact.
Oh yeah, with eye contact. You know why I hate eye contact? Because I don't talk to you like this. I have this friend, quick story, I can't give her eye contact, I don't know why. I think she's so cool, I can't even look at her. But I call that referencing, because I look at you and then I look at you. In the olden days, we used to actually sit kids down and say, look at me, and put a timer for 5 seconds. That like stressed me out, who does that? But referencing is important because I look at you because I need you to feel important, because you are. But I also need to look at you. Referencing is much better, but they go like this still. Look at me.
I know.
You know?
My guy hates it.
But people may hate it, but that's in most IEPs. And then they go down the hallway and they talk to every single adult. Good morning, Mrs. Smith. And I'm going, maybe now's not the time because she's teaching, right? And I've got a grade 11 boy right now that I'm working with. He's amazing, delicious. He's fantastic, but he goes by every single classroom as he's walking through the hallway. Good morning, Mr. Crowley. And Mr. Crowley says good morning because my child's a special snowflake. And I walked in, his name's not like Mr. Crowley, but I walked into Mr. Crowley's and I said, this sounds horrible, but we're going to teach him not to say hi because you're teaching a class and you're stopping. And everybody goes, well, he's going to say hi. But he said, then when he says hi, when another kid is talking, what does that kid think? I'm not important because we have to stop and say hi for this young man who's walking through the hallway. And what happens when that young man is walking through Walmart saying hi to everybody, strangers or not, right? That's not going to get that person a job, and I'm sorry, somebody's gonna call the police. But it does happen. I have been on that side not more than one time. I have been on the side when somebody got really close to somebody on the bus and was tired and put their arm around them. In White Rock, where everybody is a little bit older,
Yes.
you don't put your arm around the senior citizen lady. You just don't. But what is a disadvantage that our kids have?
They can't tell the
They-
social cues.
But they also look neurotypical, right? They're not coming on with a situation where it says, I have autism.
Oh, I
So
see.
people are going to assume
They're
that you're,
normal.
right? A great question a young boy asked me. He got in trouble because there was a young lady with a very low cut shirt on the bus and she smelled fantastic.
Oh, no.
So what did he do? He went in for that sniff.
Oh, my goodness.
But the question he asked me was, if she doesn't want me to look and smell, why does she have such beautiful perfume on and keep her shirt that low? But isn't that a great question? But I have to say, rule number 17,497,000, and you and I just know, no matter what, you can't do that. I have no reason outside of you can't, right? Just like when you go to a bar, and he said to me, but the boy left the chair when he was sitting to the girl to go to the bathroom, so I thought I could ask her out. I said, he's coming back. But I thought since he's gone, I said, doesn't matter, navigate, they're together, were they touching, were they hugging? Yeah, but he goes, I thought it was my opening, not your opening, right?
My son will always ask why sometimes. He always thinks there's a reason that can be explained. And it can be so frustrating because you can't sometimes.
But I think sometimes we're asking the question why. As our kids get older, just like with my kids, I think honesty is the best. Sometimes I am honest. The world has social rules of life, and I did not make them. But because we have these rules, we're not chaotically running through stop signs, swearing at each other, fighting in places. We follow a rule, and the rules may change from country to country to keep ourselves safe and to keep ourselves running smoothly. If I could tell you the answer, I would, but some things don't have an answer. But I do tell kids, they're just the social rules of life. And when the kid knows it's a rule, sometimes that helps. But if you try to over-explain it, the kid starts to get anxious because you're over-explaining it and we're making it much more convoluted. Sometimes it is what it is. Yes?
What about a teenager who thinks they know everything and who isn't that receptive? You know, who doesn't have the question of why
Right.
it's not because they, so they don't realize that there's. So how do you fit that social emotional piece when they're not necessarily asking?
Can you give me like a little bit more kind of?
Well, it relates more to her question of how do you work that into the study group. So if there's skills that they could use,
Right.
they don't see it as a weakness necessarily,
Right.
but there's situations where that they could, that it is a weakness, but
Right.
they don't recognize it.
You know what's one of the things that, and thanks for bringing that up, one of the questions was is if a child doesn't feel that they need the skills to do something, they won't buy into what you're trying to teach. That's not unusual. But it's not unusual with, I think most teenagers think they know everything. I've got some in my house. But I think that part of that is I think it goes back to the reflection and the honesty and the function. Because if you think about your kid, and going back to what you were saying about the money and function, most kids don't want to do anything. If it's a party trick, they want to know the function of it, right? And so unless we explain to children why we're teaching this to you, and I worked with a parent on something called, I developed a program called the Ladder of Success. Because sometimes when I teach kids, I show them a ladder. The skills you learn, the benefits you get, what's going to happen in the future. If you choose not to learn this skill, this is where you get stalled in life. Because sometimes when I'm able to show the child the long-term goal of this, the intimate part of learning it right now is easier. Because what they're thinking about is this moment. I don't want to be here now. But it's kind of like, why would a kid want to work for money, like you were saying, if the parent was just buying them Lego, right? If there's no function or purpose, kids don't want to do it. Why would I change when this is really benefiting me that you're buying me stuff? Same thing with you. If a child's going, I don't want to learn it, I think part of it is We have to show the child why they're learning it, the big picture, whether you make a project out of it or whatever. But I found that I have a young boy right now that doesn't want to pay attention to the teacher because his dad has a company and he's going to work at his company. So I don't have to learn anything. I'm in grade 5, my dad's going to hire me. I built the ladder of success with him, and I showed him, before you go work at your dad's company, you're going to grow into maybe a grade 10 or 12 kid, and he's quite rude, and you're going to want to get a part-time job. To get a part-time job, you need references. So I said, let's pretend that you're not learning these skills, and you want to work, and he said, McDonald's. I said, okay, pretend you're calling me. Hi, I'm calling about Billy. Is he kind? No. Is he rude? Mm-hmm. And he said, why did you do that? And I said, because you have to understand, to get to here, you need these skills. So as soon as he started understanding, and I said, by the time you get to here where you're gonna work for your dad's company, let's look at the reality. Your dad's gonna be 55 by then. I know how old he is. Your dad might retire and the company won't be there. He's like, what? Because we have to remember that our kids live in the moment. And they think that learning that skill in the moment is boring. But if we can somehow justify it and show them how it's gonna benefit them, not with our mouth, because honestly, you're her mom and she's never gonna believe you. Just like my kids don't believe anything I say. But if you actually justify it and show them why they're learning it, you have a better path. There's some questions? Oh, do you have a lot of books that you can send along? I can make, you know what? I can make a book list and send it to Stella, and then you can get it through ASBC and Stella. Is that cool?
Great.
I used to read a lot, but then I got old. And then like sleep took over. So yes.
I just want to mention a book actually, it's called Differently Wired. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
It just came out. I just got a copy, but it's wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. Can we put that on our list? That's fantastic.
Can you repeat
Differently
the
Wired,
Differently
Raising an
Wired?
Exceptional Child in a Conventional World.
Somebody gave me that book and I have not cracked it open yet, but I appreciate that.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Differently Wired by,
I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called Differently Wired, Raising an Exceptional Child in a Conventional World. And she's also established a,
Exceptional Child in a conventional world, differently wired.
And she's also established, like a network for parenting support. I can't remember the name of that right now.
Oh, cool.
It slips my mind, but it's really cool.
No, you know what? I love reading other people's experiences too, because sometimes you don't feel so alone anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's why, like I said, to me, and coming back to that lovely lady in the back, I think that was one of my biggest struggles with kids, and especially older kids, because as you get older, you've got the right to reject learning, right? But you don't know what you may reject, what's gonna happen. Remember when we were kids, like maybe you guys didn't do this, but remember sneaking out the window and your parents said, don't do that, and you did it, then you have kids, and then now you know why your parents were saying that, right? And that's kind of like with me, I feel like I don't wanna ever drag kids through life, whether they have ASD or not. And I think that part of the thing is that the more you can get your kid to buy in, the more you can get them to functionally understand why they're getting these tools. And that's why I feel so humbled that even though I've done this for 25 years, I consistently and continuously reinvent myself. Because now with this new job that I'm doing, transitioning kids, I'm hitting bumps that I might have not hit 10 years ago, because 10 years ago the world was different, right? Every 10 years it changes. 10 years ago we didn't have kids doing this constantly, or 15 years ago. So I have to tell a kid, I know you don't like me for telling you not to use your phone because he's at Walmart all the time, but you're gonna get fired because the other kids, he's like, but the other kids are all on their phone. I go, yeah, but they haven't been caught. You're like out there reading people, right? You know what I mean? He's not savvy enough to know to do that. So I have to tell him the consequence. I want you to understand, this is a rule, you need to follow it, or here's a consequence. And I may need to let him fail. I may need to let him get that consequence, because sometimes when we say it, it's not real because it didn't happen yet, right? But we're all like that, isn't it? We're all like that until we experience that pain, right? Don't date that guy who's gonna break your heart. You date him even more, right? Then it breaks your heart.
But how as a parent, you can let your kids fail? Like, I know it makes sense, but I don't know, I haven't done it, yeah.
How old is your, we were asking about how do we let our kids fail.
So
We're
it's
still
only-
kind of talking IEP, but we're
Yes,
more.
it's only 6, but,
Right.
yeah. but I know it's, I have an older
But
one.
then we can link this to the IEP.
Yes.
I think we teach our kids to fail by making sure that we've got the tools for prevention in the beginning. We need to make them as strong as possible, and then we need to kind of push them out of the nest a little bit, right? Because here's an example of maybe this is not exactly to your talking, is that some kids love completion. Do any of your kids love to start something and need to finish it?
Yes.
Right? That's really a kind of a strong suit with some young people with autism, because there's a sense of, I did it, it's done, I don't have to look at it. Like if they start a puzzle and you remove them from the puzzle,
Yes.
like with 6 pieces left,
Yes.
a behavior can happen. Or another one is, kids are working at school and they have a worksheet and the bell rings and the teacher goes, listen, leave your work, we're gonna go outside, you can finish it when you come back. And our kid loses it because they didn't finish it, right? And then that's, again, I use the word social suicide because then the kid has a huge tantrum and everybody's going, whoop, we don't have to do the work, why are you crying, right? Where I've got a boy right now that loves worksheets and working so much, and everybody's like, isn't that great, he loves worksheets? And me, I'm like, yeah, right? Where that's where I would build a strategy. When you know your child and where they struggle, because everybody here's an ABA program, right?
Yes.
Think about your ABA program. Think about what we teach our kid. Touch head. This is always your head, right?
Sorry,
I-
I'm new to this.
Oh.
I don't know what an ABA program is.
An ABA program is an applied behavior analysis program, so it's the home-based program for children and youth with autism, where somebody like me comes in and works alongside with a parent in designing a program with BIs. Thank you for asking. But in home program, a lot of times, and I've worked all the way back to working throughout the replication side in the Lomas Institute. I think the mistakes we made was not teaching our kids to fail, because we teach our kids so much. That's correct, yay! Versus going, I have this song that I sing with kids, hooray, hooray, mistakes are okay. So example, the other day I came into my high school class, and this is a true story, happens every day. I had on white overalls, but of course I'm driving and I spilled coffee all over my overalls. So I said to my kids in the high school, I just know them, I knew them being their teacher. I walked in with my zipper of my sweater and I said, put everything down, put your books down, something just happened. They're like, what? And I unzipped my overalls, which were white, and they have coffee all over. And I said, before I even walked in here, I made at least 4 to 5 mistakes. Just like you, I'm human. So I need some help. I need you to help me. Because what do we do every single day? We help them. How many opportunities do we give your kid to help somebody else? We're such good helpers, but we don't teach them to be a helper. So then how do we expect them to grow and be empathetic if we're constantly being the helper? So we went on the board and made this elaborate, like, you can go home and change. So that I was like, great, I drew a map. I live in Surrey. We're in Vancouver, it's 2 hours away, impossible. And then they're going, we came up with all these answers, and they were so juiced that I had a problem, that I had failed, right? And they were so proud, yes.
Sorry, I have to yell out because I really want to share this example that you can tell them later. So it's about Nick, my son. So Bo has been teaching him for 12
You
years.
have to go in front of the camera. Time out.
So I'm sharing this example because it's a success of how a kid with autism go from having no mistake to now that he has a part-time job and he can make a mistake and be very positive. So how it started was when he was 5-6 years old. He has to finish everything that he has started. If we stop him, he will have a tantrum. But then he learned throughout the years with a lot of good work by Bo that now he has a part-time job. The last time he worked, he has a job coach, but he was doing really well. He actually made a mistake, and the job coach thought, oh, he's going to be really upset. But instead of being very upset, he told the job coach that everybody made a mistake, and it's okay that I learned from it. So today I learned from my mistake, and next time I'll do better. And then he walked away, and the job coach was so surprised, and it's all the years of work that built up that our kid needs to be changed by being perfect. It has to be rigid, perfect. I can make a mistake, but I learn from my mistake, and and it's all the years of ABA therapy that Bo was talking about, and also a lot of application. He's now
So how did you start, for instance? Like if you give him like a book, right? And he
Well-
needs to finish from 1 to like 100. How did you
But I think
start?
one
I
of the
will
things
let
is-
Bo answer the
Yeah.
question.
And firstly, I have to say is, I'm humbled by Stella's son, because I'm gonna cry. He taught me way more than I taught him. Because he led me down the path of following his needs, rather than me going, here's the cookie cutter of what I need you to learn, versus who are you going to be when you grow up, what do you like? He is so proud to be at Choices, and he's so good, and he gets to work on time, and he has all the skills of what he needs to do. But part of that is systematically teaching that. So how do you teach that? Is you look at your child and you have to go baby steps. Because all of us want change so bad. Because if I had a pill, I'd give it to everybody. But part of the biggest changes is to be able to go, what can I make a small change in and reinforce the child and they can do without totally falling apart. So say for example, the child there's 10 questions on a worksheet. You build up a reinforcement system because you have to give that child something to get, to perceive, to feel accomplished for not doing the work. To them, failure was not to have to do all 10. So I may start very small. If it's a worksheet, just an example,
Yes.
where there's 10 and I have check boxes, and the last one I've got it checked off not to do. But as soon as that's happening, the person next to him might find out what is your highest reinforcer for not doing that. Because it's going to be painful, isn't it? You know, you were raising your hand. For some kids, it's painful not to finish something. It's not just a behavior, it's a need, right? And so what you have to do is honor that and to understand. And I know that from my family, for OCD, how painful it is. I could say, you've touched the stove 20 times. Why do you have to keep, I'm looking at it logically, and the person's going, but I need to do it 21 times. So if you need to do it, you have to go back to that baseline and slowly change it by reinforcing and supporting that child and also teaching them the why. It may take a long time. So if there's 10 things on a worksheet and the last one's checked off not to do, soon as that child gets to 10, if that child loves gummy bears more than life, right? You might give that child a gummy bear for not doing it and then going outside and not engaging in. I like the way you didn't do number 10. Not doing number 10 is really good because what are you doing? You're reminding them, right? You want it to be like a Band-Aid that you're ripping off more than, because it's gonna hurt. It's something you've done for a long time. But you have to know, going back to their paycheck, that they're gonna get something for not engaging in that behavior. But you have to be consistent and know through data how much you're gonna do this, and to see that the behavior, so say they cried 10 minutes the first day, then they cry 8 minutes the next day. You can't be like, I think today was better, which is why I'm gonna talk a little bit about the data, because if you don't have data, all we're doing is a lot of guessing, right?
I just have a specific question regarding IEP and better grades. I wrote it on the card.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
I was trying to raise a hand from here.
I'm gonna find it, maybe this one. No, that's not the one. Regarding letter grades. My child might feel unsuccessful if he sees low grades. Have you seen an IEP with modified grading systems that suits your child? Or is it possible to not have, absolutely. You know what? If your child is in a letter grade age, and if a child is on a modified or adapted curriculum, firstly, schools are going away from grades anyways, is kind of what they're starting to talk about. And again, I'm giving the disclaimer that there might be a possible change also to IEPs, but you can obviously write with your teacher an anecdotal positive report, 100%. I have kids all the way through high school that have never gotten a typical report card, that have always gotten an IEP-driven report card, 100%. And I think what's really important, especially if your child's going to engage in reading that we need to talk about the big wows. And I think also as a parent, because honestly, I actually have some kids that read their data. You know, they actually like, what is that thing in my backpack every day? What's written about me? You know, good question. Would you like to sit down and look at it, right? And then if it's just like, if the data's like, did well, did poorly, and again with data, really important. Data needs to be objective, not subjective.
I go crazy. Sometimes I read data. Boy, was he a little monkey and brat today. And I'm like, what? Not only that, is that how rude is that? But secondly is I don't smell, taste, feel, or measure monkey or rabbit, right? You need to let me know. That's why IEPs have to be measurable. I need to see success or deficit, so I either move it forward or we take the goal back. Because sometimes our goals are going to be lofty. They're going to be too big, right? So if I'm saying, for example, I like to look at the data because if I don't see movement in what's happening in a child's data that is based on their IEP. So does everybody have data or no data?
No data. Not at all.
No data, but I don't know how to have data. with
Okay,
IEP.
let's talk about that for a second. Without data, how do you measure your IEP? Because this morning, I couldn't think of the word. I'm telling my daughter, what's that red, green, and yellow thing? She's like, a pepper? I'm like, that's it. How do you remember what happened from 8 to 3? Right? How do you know that if the IEP says, Johnny is going to not poke Billy 14 times today, how did the IEP measure 14 and keep it when 9,000 other things happen? That's why I share with you, make your IEP concise so the data can be concise. People don't like to take data because historically they're scared of it. They think we're gonna have to take pie charts and graphs and, take a piece of tape and write stuff down. I think that number one, child first, data second. Do not be sitting there in the corner writing data and your child is eloped across the street, right? The data has to be effective. The easiest thing to do, and this is what I do with my data, and Stella can jump in as well, please, is that I take the IEP goals, I put it into a data sheet, and I write the child's behaviors, and they can just tick it for me. Then I can see percentage-wise if what we're doing is working. If I look at that child's data, and mind you, I would look at 30 sheets a night, because I ask them to send it to me every day, right? I like to know what's happening. Sometimes I don't get to all 30, sometimes I go on the weekend, but at least I can skim through it. I also ask the EA, if there's something really stressful happening because I don't get to the data, put it in red, right? Highlight it, let me know there's a problem, because I don't want to sit on it for 2 weeks. But technically your data should be telling you over the course of several weeks that if you're marking it and you're looking at percentages, that good behavior is increasing, maladaptive behavior is decreasing. But without data, how do you measure that your IEP is working for your child? It's impossible. It's 11:30. Do I still have half an hour? Are we doing okay? Does anybody need a break? You guys okay? So, has anybody wanted data and not been able to get it? Can you tell me a little bit about why? Maybe I can help with that.
They don't have the time, basically, yeah, so I think that's part-time support, and, yeah, they were like, well, child first, we just do
Right.
that, and,
Is the lovely lady saying that there's no data because that there's no time?
and they were also saying that, it's like grading your child every day, and that's just not something we do.
Right. So, I always talk to children with autism about how we meet in the middle, because I teach flexibility. The other day, in my chart at school, we've got flexibility points for the staff, my staff and myself included, in the kids. And I talk about being flexible means meeting in the middle. It doesn't mean you always have to do what I say, but sometimes I have to listen to you, sometimes you have to listen to me when it's not must do, right? Same thing with data. I think people historically are so afraid of data that perhaps they've not seen something so simple, because I'm gonna be honest, people in my field love graphing and doing heavy duty data, and many times, with all due respect, EAs don't come from a place where they're taught to do the data, so when they get the data sheets, they feel overwhelmed and frightened. And sometimes they feel kind of like maybe they're being tested or stupid, right? So for me, I think honestly is to make the data so simple that we can get something, because honestly at the beginning, something's better than nothing. And then when you get a little bit and they're successful, just like our kids, because the way I look at it, if an EA is not feeling successful, your kid's not gonna be successful. We're a village now, right? Question, and I'm gonna take this a little bit.
Data sheets here, do you have data sheets here?
Yeah, that's exactly that.
I do have an example of a data sheet, but, I would prefer that you email me personally for me to send one, because, what's happened to me in the past is people have taken my data sheets and finagled them, and there was a problem with them, and then I don't wanna be responsible. Like, I'd like to be able to send it to you with a copyright saying, this is is mine, please use it, but I can't promise you it's gonna give you what you need. But if you give your email to Stella, I will send you a couple of copies of blank data sheets.
Oh, thank you.
And like I said, but again, think of this, every place is different. If you're in a preschool, your data sheet might have to be super simple, because what do preschool kids do? Right, you're running around. I cannot stand a person running around with a clipboard constantly. It needs to be something so simple they can walk back and check it off. That's why I'm saying, if you have 67 goals, do you actually think somebody can data 67 goals a day? For your person, you might be able to say, again, meeting in the middle. If you give somebody a simple data sheet, you can also reflectively say, would you mind starting in 2 days a week? Right? Again, I think a lot of it comes from fear and judgment. And I think, and the other thing is like they say they're grading them every day. Well, with all due respect, we kind of need to, right?
So, well, apparently, in Vancouver, not in Burnaby in Surrey, the EA don't have ABA training, so that's another problem.
In where, I'm sorry?
Vancouver.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and, I don't
We're
know-
talking about ABA training
Yeah.
for Surrey and different,
So
like
that's,
Vancouver and
so
Surrey.
that's a problem, right? Cause if they don't have ABA training and you want them to fill something that they might not have seen or
Yeah.
known before, that's why it, like you said, it probably makes sense to make it simple, make
Right.
it easy.
But let's look at it this way.
Yes.
Pretend you take a job and you're new at the job. You're always gonna be in a learning curve. I don't care if you work at IBM or, you know, Savon or whatever. Part of the job and working with a child is providing information. I don't really know how to decipher, I can't take data. I think what people are saying is, this must be some kind of magical, mystical stuff that you have to learn in a dark corner with a professor, rather than saying, let's demystify the data. Let's make the data something that doesn't just help me, but helps you. Because how proud are you when we meet, that I look at the data, like right now I'm meeting with somebody later today, and I look at the data and I sit down with the EA and I go, I wanna thank you for helping decrease that. Because without you, this couldn't have happened. And that person goes, oh, I thought you were gonna judge me. No, the most important thing is that person is a reflection of your child, they're helping your kid. I think they're so scared that you're gonna find out they're doing something wrong, right? There's so much fear behind it. But in the beginning, I think a lot of it is if they start taking data, make it simple, and then encourage and encourage. I've never walked into a job, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I still walked into a job doing specifically what I'm doing at a place that I don't know. I'm at a huge learning curve. Yesterday I was sitting in my office going, I feel kind of lonely, because I don't, you know what I mean? Because you don't know stuff. When you learn stuff, you're more comfortable. But at the end of the day and those EAs don't know me. So when I gave them the data, we were talking about stuff, we went over it, and then the next day they took it and I looked at it and I go, thank you so much, I didn't know that Bobby was doing that, without you I wouldn't know that. They're going, you didn't yell at me? Because last person did the yelling, you know what I mean? We don't know the historic knowledge behind the hate of the data. But I do have to say honestly, you can't really reflect without it, because I don't remember what I had for breakfast. So I really don't know how you're supposed to remember if the child did the 4 goals. But tick sheets, like I said, I'll send you it, but and I'll try to make it a couple of different sheets, like for different age groups. Any other questions on that? Good.
Okay, just.
Please, yes.
Yeah, because you asked us, I have 2 kids with ASD, and one is in grade 3 now, and.
Lovely lady talking about her 2 children.
Was lucky. And school tried to apply something, they tried to make a data, but it's quite uncomfortable because too informal, like he participated in group.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
does he successfully participate in group, or he may throw it out from the group? It's a
Right.
big question.
So, do you have like a me working with you?
Yes, I think this data sheet would be relief. This is for school, would be relief, but how we can apply it on IEP meeting, say, oh, okay guys, maybe we can go this way? Like
I
this?
think part of it is, again, tread lightly, you get more, what is it saying? You get something more with honey. You guys are forgetting the saying.
Catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Thank you, my friend. Catch more flies with honey. I think part of it, again, is going back, because you've got something, so you can say, I really enjoy this information. I have a couple of suggestions to add to make it a little bit more measurable. Because even though no, let's remember, going back again to the way beginning of when we were talking, so many people that are taking these jobs in special education are people who are covering mat leaves or people who are perhaps not as well versed in special education or taking data. I'm working with somebody right now who's running a special ed classroom. She's just like, please help me, I've never done an IEP, right? So there's again that fear, but I think it's in the presentation. Like I said, the last card you have in your back pocket is anger and, the advocacy from that point, right? Right, we're there to help. So I think what would be helpful, if you took your data, do you get it every day?
Yeah.
So if you take it and perhaps added a couple of things and brought it back to them to say, I was wondering, can we just add these little steps? They're not gonna see big red X's, right? You're there to help. But I think if you're gonna get a vague data sheet, it's maybe not really helping you know if your child's meeting those goals. I get that all the time. They're just like, isn't it good enough to say Billy's sitting in circle time? And I'm like, but I don't know, is he kicking, biting, running, you know what I mean? Sitting for 20 seconds. So I would just add a little bit more to that and then just kindly ask and then perhaps follow it up with a Tim Hortons coffee. I'm sorry to say these things, but this is reality. Reality is people are overworked and tired. And sometimes, like human beings, we get our back up before we even should, because as soon as we see a parent coming, the last parent just maybe yelled at them and their back's up for you even though it wasn't you. And I know that because, again, the other day with my own child, I wrote, dear, thank you so much. Can my child do this? Thank you, have a lovely day. Hope it's your Friday, have a nice weekend. Can my child please have this? I got no. That was my response. But I can't respond, that was super rude of you writing no, so, you know what I mean? I wrote back, thank you so much for the open communication. I'm going, does that sound mean? And then I said, hopefully I can catch you Monday, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, we'll see. And I'm like, okay, bye-bye, thank you, But I would love to say something else, and it wasn't bye-bye and thank you.
So lots of people ask for a sample of the
The IEP, of the data sheet.
data sheet.
Sure.
So how can they get it?
And also too is if you work with a consultant, with all due respect, I'm assuming they have data sheets.
Oh,
So,
no, we have our own, but I just thought maybe the
oh,
ones we
different
have-
ones, sure.
Yeah, different
I
ones.
just wanna make sure that,
Yes.
I wanna be really clear of the fact is that I'm making sure that you always talk to your consultant. I don't wanna ever, disrupt anything and make anybody uncomfortable. Are there any tips and tricks to help advocate for your kids in the school system? Any words that might help or hinder? Any approach that might help or hinder? Like I said, I think number one, going back to the honey, I think it's always really important that we recognize that the person at school doesn't know you, the teachers don't know you, they don't know what you're feeling or not feeling. All they see is your kiddo. I think one of the things that I found as a parent and as an advocate and as working with kids, you sometimes, and I wanna be humble about the fact of talking about everybody, is that I'm sure many times you felt that you've gotta have a really tough skin for what people tell you, right? A really tough skin. A lot of times, for example, when it's so easy, like I said with that lady writing me that email, I wanted to say something really mean to her, like, this is my kid, right? But I have to remember, she doesn't love my kid the way I love my kid, right? And a really big thing to remember is that I have parents that tell me so many times, but I want them to love my kid. School's never going to love your child the way you do. They might enjoy your child, but you don't want school to love them. You want them to support them and to be realistic. Love can turn to so many different emotions, like over-helping, secluding. I've got the EA goes, he listens to me. And I'm like, but he's gotta listen to everybody. And the EA goes, but he loves me the most. And I know that makes that person feel so great. But part of that is always making sure that we're very clear about what we want. That's why I'm saying before you walk into your IEP, I highly suggest write it down. Don't do it from memory. I find myself, no matter what, when I walk in for my own daughter, everything I thought I wanted to say, I forget. Because I'm panicked. Because if they come in and I can see their backs are up. Do you ever walk into a meeting and you can smell anger? Do you know what I mean? Or you can feel that they're already upset. And then everything I wanted to say goes out because I kind of crumble. Because I'm going, this isn't going very well. A lot of times I go in, and I think a lot of things that helps is, and I know small things like this are really, kids with autism love reinforcement, so do human beings, right? And when you walk into your first IEP meeting, or one that's possibly held really early, my first one this morning was 7:15. I know this sounds, I can't think of the word in English, but like the mom brought donuts. I know that sounds like you're, I don't wanna say bribing, but I think you're sending a message that we're all human, we're here about my kid. It's not that I'm saying you have to go out and buy donuts, but I think that kind of broke the ice, cause everybody's like, oh, I'm so hungry, cause nobody really wanted to be there at 7:15. I could tell that they're on their phone. The first comment was, I didn't even get to see my kid off to school this morning, right? You're not always gonna get the nicest comments, but as soon as those donuts went on the table, and then we put a picture of the kid on the table, all of a sudden the mood changed. Because we were there about that kiddo. I said, I'm sorry, I know how hard it is to not see your kid off to school. I validated, and then we moved on. Because if you don't start the meeting off right, it just becomes a little bit of a battleground. Again, when we all work hard, we all bleed. We're all made from the same fabric. So going in with our backs up is never going to work. Because what will happen is the school district will bring tons of admin in, then the meeting is all about us not getting along and communicating, and your little person whose picture's in the middle of the table is pushed to the side, right? I like the other thing is another tip is be concise. Remember that if a meeting is 1 hour, remember that it's 1 hour. Because one of the things is I could talk here with you guys till 6, but I know in 15 minutes I should be done. But part of the thing is 1 hour shouldn't be 1 hour, and nobody gets worse is when we start to rush, right? So when you go into your IEP meeting, my suggestion is have 4 goals, 4, 1 in each domain. From that you can build on. That's another big tip. But I think the biggest one is be human. Please.
My daughter was just diagnosed with ASD in July, and I don't really know what I want. She's had 3 IEPs because she was recognized as being an atypical learner.
Right.
And these were kind of vague, and to me in some ways almost comical, the goals were put out there. But I went with the flow.
Right.
And so I'm still kind of feeling my way. So when I go in there, this time we have the Sunny Hill report.
Right.
And I'm gonna do the best I can to do my homework beforehand, but I think I'm still going to be kind of feeling my way through. So do you have any words for that?
But I think part of that is what you want is also kind of your hopes and dreams, because from that you can build.
Right.
So take one thing. The first thing that comes to your mind, what do you want for your daughter? If it's independence, if it's
Actually, it's not independence because she almost burnt the house down yesterday cooking noodles in the microwave without asking mom's permission.
okay, but that's a great goal. So that might be your goal. I need my daughter to be able to ask before she does something.
Yeah.
Right?
I gave her mine saying she has to ask me first. So.
Right, so that could be your goal, and from that, they will develop a goal.
Right.
If you need something to work, because how old is your daughter, I'm sorry?
Pardon?
How old?
She's 9.
9. So if your daughter is 9 years old, what I also do is another really helpful hint, download, look up developmental, it's on my handout, developmental milestones. If your daughter is 9, go down 2 years, right? 7 to 9 years old, because you said your daughter's.
Right.
Those are really good tools for you to know what other kids their age are doing. You know what I mean? Like, especially when it comes to media, the worst thing to do is, like, if everybody's into Pokemon, we should be teaching your kid Pokemon, not Barney, right?
Yeah.
Know what other kids are into and doing. But for your child, you want to kind of go, these are some of the kids that could be things that are frightening to me.
Right.
Like she almost burned down the house.
Yeah.
Give them that example and
Yeah.
just say, A, she didn't ask me. B, this is what happened. C, and then they could go, okay, your daughter needs to learn to, and that could be her first goal.
Yeah.
To come to you prior to doing something. Meaning, I'm just gonna guess, I'm not diagnosing,
Yeah.
that she may be impulsive. So we might want to increase at school that before she does something in the classroom, she raises her hand before she just leaves. Pretend.
Right.
But use your own skills to know, because it's their job to help you define that into a goal.
Right.
Does that help?
It does, yeah. Yeah, the irony is I actually worked as a special ed assistant years ago and with kids for 5 years with
Right.
different special needs.
on you because your heart's in a different place. But I think that part of that is think of like 2 or 3 things you want her to do, and you can make that into the IEP. The worst thing is to go in to go, I guess I wanted to do grade 4 math, right? Because you don't even know where she's at with that, right? Go in with what you need her to do to be able to do great, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Think of the skills she needs to be able to be a learner that she's lacking in your eyes.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How,
Oh, is this a question?
Oh, sorry.
Is there more questions?
So mine is relating to that. Very quickly, how
Sorry, I'm losing my voice like a cold, I apologize.
how feasible for us to change the IEP? Because mine is gonna be the second one, and the first one can be quite, you know, it's very, very basic. We actually have the high one you have.
Yeah.
So now in grade 1, like if I come up with 4 or 5, and he's a pretty fast learner, what if he achieve it and I want something else? Like, cause last
Right.
year they just like meet us in October,
And then see you in June.
See you in June, and I have no idea what happened.
So one of the things you wanna do, another little helpful hint, is make sure that you write your IEP goals small enough that you know they're achievable in 6 weeks, and then just refer to the integration support teacher to say, I don't need to physically pull every single person back into this group, but I would like to make sure that changes are made as my child meets. The problem is we always wanna meet, and that's not possible. But you can talk to your learning teacher about changing the goals, and then please send out a note to everybody on the team that this goal has been changed.
So it's possible. Thank you.
Facebook Live is gonna end at in 10 minutes, so, but we still have more time after that, so Bo is gonna answer the question for Facebook first, and then we'll close it in 10 minutes. You can still ask.
One of these questions here is, this is a good one. What about where there's no EA? How to ask classroom teacher to collect data? So, if there's no EA, asking a classroom teacher. So, that's really tricky. For the fact is, more than likely, the teacher is pretty busy teaching the class, and that's what you're gonna get from the teacher. Has anybody here ever had that experience of no EA, a classroom teacher taking data?
I haven't, but I'm just wondering why that person wouldn't have an EA, because if you're assessed with autism spectrum disorder, we're eligible for $19,000 in the class for EAs.
Except the problem this year is we're low on EAs, there's been budget cuts, there's been teacher
You need
cuts.
2, you need 2 special kids for 1 EA. You need 2 special kids for 1 EA. One is not enough to support, one special kid is not enough to support 1 EA.
So the question was why is that child without an EA? But honestly, right now, just getting back to your question, there is a lot of kiddos right now with budget cuts. I mean, a lot of young people with autism without assessments. I've got kids in kindergarten that come in unassessed, they've never been seen before, and they're getting 8 hours. And I'm thinking, how'd they get 8 hours? They're like, that's all we got, you know what I mean? I don't know what the rhyme or reason is right now with the budget cuts and the cuts of EAs, but that is very true. There is a lot of budget cuts, and there are kids, if they're doing well enough, and what is that kind of?
Going below the radar?
Going below the radar, thank you. You are very good at like giving me we're gonna go on a traveling show together. But flying below the radar, it goes back to, if that kid's without an EA, I hate to use these words, when we hear it, he's doing good enough, right? There is no standard for that, but that's happening. However,
Yes.
if there's going to be no EA and just a teacher, that has happened to me before, I will only ask the teacher with consideration and speaking with him or her to reflect on my biggest issue and to take data only on that. I cannot at this point see how a teacher is going to take a full day's data sheet when she not only has your kid that doesn't have an EA, she's got 7 other kids in there that are going through divorce, trauma, undiagnosed, newly diagnosed. It's gonna, right? All of that. That classroom teacher, and again, I really support that. 7 minutes. 7 minutes. But so for me, the answer to that question is, speak to your teacher, see if you could take data on one of the behaviors, and see what they could do and build from there. I wish I had a magic. This is a behavioral question, so I'm going to put this to the side. That's a behavioral question too. These are more behavioral questions on IEP questions, so that's another talk. How would a data sheet differ for a teen in the same way an IEP from kindergarten to high school? So at the end of the day is, every data sheet is only built around who that child is. So, you know the saying, you've seen one kid with autism, right? You've seen one kid with autism. So at the end of the day is, every single data sheet should be adapted towards that child. You might have, with all due respect to every child or children that we work with, you might have, with all due respect, a child that's in kindergarten who has autism and maybe in grades 9, 10, and 11 and is working on the same similar skills they did in kindergarten. Not because tons of hard work hasn't been put in, but because that learner specifically may have different comorbidities. We know what that is, right? Other diagnostics outside of autism, like cognitive delays. I've got children that are visually impaired, hearing impaired, lots of different things. But the data is going, or the IEP is going to change because a child morphs, and we take the last year, like your IEP, and we go, look what the child has done, look what the child's capable of, let's change his strengths and differences, and let's be very clear. You look at the prompt levels. When your child starts to be more independent, we start to look, where can we start placing your child? Because remember we talked about the EA? If your child is a rock star in PE, a rock star, and the PE teacher can be spoken to do some of the small supports that are needed, do you think that maybe I might start to pull the EA out there a little bit because a child needs to have signs of independence? So answering this question about how does it change, we start to kind of want to morph with some kids, if it's applicable, to where are they going to be less prompted, less supported by the EA, because what we really want to do is, going back to what we were saying about, who was it saying about looking at the teacher, is that our kids are able to take the information from anybody, right? Again, when you go to work, most of us work with multiple people, right? But if you're only able to take information from one of your coworkers, you're gonna have a problem. That's what I'm saying, is getting to learn from multiple people is huge. So as your IEP grows, I try to grow the teacher more into it, right? Because, right, it might be that your EA is a very strong support in kindergarten, because kindergarten can be, you know, scary. Some kids maybe were just starting an ABA program or haven't been in an ABA program. Some kids, how many kids cry when you go to kindergarten? So many, right? I think my kids did. I was like, get in there. But at the end of the day is, there's a lot of things that EA needs to be close, right? Because we have to start with closeness, because what do we not do? We don't assume. We start at a baseline. And then when we do that closeness, we can build from that by eliminating an EA, because we're actually developing strategies. None of this is hope. I'm sorry, I wish it was. It's not. We don't hope and pray. We are scientists. We build strategies. The IEP has to have the action plan. What are the strategies? Who's going to look at them? Who's going to implement them? Very important. A lot of the IEPs don't have an action plan. They just have strategies. To me, I want to know who's going to do it, right? Is it going to be the principal doing this? Like if the child's at lunch with no support, I want to go, how's my kid going to learn to be social at lunch when nobody's there, right? So really important to make sure that your IEP grows with your child. One thing I really want to share based on what this question is as well, for those of you that your children are getting a little bit older, there is very awesome opportune times for your child not to think that you're going to some dark room to talk about them and the goals you want for them. I encourage children, especially if they are vocal and verbal and are interested, and even if they're not and using their talkers, to start to tell me a little bit, even in grade 2, what would you like to see? Tell me, right? You need to tell me. If you think Mrs. Smith, the EA, sits too close to you, share that with me. We can share that at the IEP. When it's even comfortable for your child, not everybody feels comfortable. I so much encourage my high school kids to come to the IEP. This is about you. Tell me what you want, because we need to stop doing me statements. We need to start you advocating for yourself, because I'm not going to be in Costco on row 28 with you for the rest of your life. So changing the IEP as the kids grow, and as Stella knows, really needs to be the self-advocacy. As she was sharing, I'm not gonna always be there to tell her son, you need 6 pencils, cause 5 may break at work. He needs to go 5 broke today, tomorrow I'm bringing 6. Time out. Is it done? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are very happy to have Bo as our speaker. If you still want to listen to IEP talk, we have actually 2 other workshops. One in North Shore on October the 16th, Tuesday night, and another one in New West. It's on a Saturday morning from 10 to 12. Okay, thank you.